Alright, hello and welcome to another MTG Arena Brawl Commander Deck Tech. Today we have the Golgari guild with Nissa of Shadowed Boughs. She's a 4 converted mana cost 4 loyalty planeswalker that has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a loyalty counter on Nissa of Shadowed Boughs. For +1, you can untap a land, and you can choose if you wish to make it a 3/3. If you don't feel like exposing your land and you just want to untap it, that's fine. -5, you can return a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield, or from your hand as well, from the graveyard or your hand, with 2/1/1 counters on it. I always forget the hand thing. So if you play her on 5, +1 her, -5 her, so +1 with the landfall, -5, you can play any 5 converted mana cost creature, which is a lot of things in this deck. So let's move on to the first set of creatures, which are all rampy, gets more mana creatures. We have the Gilded Goose, the only 1-drop in the format for ramp. When it enters the battlefield, you create a food token. It is a deer or 2. You can pay 1 green and a colorless to tap it to create a food token, and you can sacrifice a food token to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. We have Lotus Cobra, landfall, 2 mana 2/1. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create any color of mana. Then we have the Tangled Florahedron. You can either use it as a land, or you can play it as a 1/1 ramping creature. Woodland Mystic, just that worst Tangled Florahedron, but I felt like I wanted a little tiny bit of extra ramp, so I went with this one. Skull Prophet, a black and a green for a 3/1 human druid that taps to add a black or a green, or you can mill 2 cards. So later in the game, when you don't need the mana and you want to put cards in your graveyard for Nissa, you can do so. Fertilid, cool little 3 mana 2/2, and you can remove a counter for 1 and a green and a colorless to find a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. It's a 0/0, but it has 2/1/1 counters on it. Solemn Simulacrum, pretty much in most decks that I run. 2/2 for 4 generic. When it enters the battlefield, find a basic, and when it dies, draw a card. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put a Shia in this slot or just as a, I don't know, helper creature, but really it is in many ways a ramp spell because it can tap for mana, so it makes your other creatures tap for mana, so it ramps you, and it also adds to the landfall triggers for Nissa and a few other things. We have the Beanstalk Giant. It is a star, where X is star is the number of lands you control, for 7 mana, but it has a ramp spell attached to it for a green and 2 colorless. Search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Next, we're going to move into some creature removal type spells. Rankle, Master of Pranks, Flying Haste for a 3/3. When it deals damage, you can draw or each player discards a card. Each player loses 1 life and draws a card. Each player sacrifices a creature. So you can do all of them, one of them, none of them. You get to choose. Polukranos Unchained. So it enters the battlefield with 6/1/1 counters. So it is a 4 mana 6/6. And if you escape for 6 mana plus exiling 3 or 6 other cards from your graveyard, you get a 12/12. You can pay a green, a black, and a colorless to have Polukranos eat something, and it'll probably live to tell the tale, but it'll be a little teeny tiny Polukranos. So it starts with 6 heads, and then you cut them off, and then if it comes back with 12. Massacre Worm, 3 black mana, 3 generic mana for a 6/5 worm, and when it enters the battlefield, all your opponent's creatures get -2/-2, so it wipes out small things, makes big things smaller, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. Kolga, the Titan Ape, is a 7/6 for 3 green and 3 colorless. When it enters the battlefield, it fights something. Can pretty much beat anything, quite often it will die. And if you attack, you can destroy target artifact or enchantment in defending player control. So if you get one attack in, that's pretty good with Kolga. And there is 1 or 2 humans in the deck to trigger its secondary ability of a green and a colorless of returning a human creature you control to its owner's hand to gain indestructible. Well, that doesn't come up all that often. One of those humans is Cheville, Bane of Monsters. It is a green and a black for a 1/3 death touch. Lots of text on this one. So at the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponents control no permanents with bounty counters on them, put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. And then whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. So it's green, black, card draw with removal when you can remove things. Nighthawk Scavenger, just a good generic. It starts as a 1/3 and just gets bigger. Flying, Death Touch, Lifelink. It's good at defending, it's good at attacking. It gets +1+ the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards that have different characteristics on their front face. Artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, planeswalker, land. I think that's it. Might be another one. Gemraiser or Gemraiser, a 4 mana 4/4 with reach and trample, but if you mutate it, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment. And the mutations only happen on non-human creatures, which is the majority of the deck. Then we have the Questing Beast, which is a 4 mana 2/2 vigilance, death touch, haste. So lots of fast things happening here. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented, although I don't know if there's very much damage prevention in this format. And whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. So you always attack the player with this card. Never attack a planeswalker with it. I made that mistake once or twice when I was first learning how to use it. Then we have 4 more creatures. These 2 kind of help fill your graveyard and one of them bring things back. When the Acolyte of Affliction is a 4 mana 2/3, when it enters the battlefield, mill 2, and then return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So that means if you need a land, you can get a land. You need a creature, you can get a creature. If you need an enchantment, planeswalker, artifact, you can do so. Sir Conrad the Grim. He's a 5 mana 5/4 legendary human knight, so he works with Kolga. Whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then you can pay 1 black and a colorless to mill each player. So you can start putting cards into your graveyard so that Nissa can bring something back from your graveyard. Finally, we have our 2 cards that play with landfall. We have the Shoot Swarm. I just got the new art thingy for it. I think it's really cool. The 3 mana 1/1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Shoot Swarm instead. So I very, very rarely will play this until I can trigger it for that 6th land. So I don't like to run it out early. It's a removal magnet because people hate this card for good reason, because it just takes over and then the game is done. Ancient Green Warden. I just got a copy of this, which I'm very thankful for. It's a 6 mana 5/7 with reach. I don't know why. It's just a big creature, I guess. You can play lands from your graveyard, so you can play the what's it called? Fabled Passage. A Fabled Passage in Evolving Wilds from your graveyard. And if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So every Nissa landfall trigger gives you 2 loyalty counters. Every landfall trigger for Shoot Swarm gives you 2 insects. So it is quite the card. And then we have a bunch of non-creature spells. We have 4 Non-creature ramp spells. Arcane Signet, which taps for any mana of a color of your commander's color identity. Cultivate, search for your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, one onto the battlefield tapped, the other into your hand, shuffle your library. Rolling Regrowth, instant speed, counters on Nissa, or instant speed Shoot Swarm tokens. So you pay a green and 2 colorless, sacrifice a land, search your library for 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. And finally, we have the Great Henge. This is a legendary artifact that costs 9 mana, but the spells cost X generic mana less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You can tap it to gain 2 green mana and gain 2 life. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. The fact that they made this non-token creature is so important, because this could have been really bad if it was any creature, or really, really good, I should say. Alright, so we have some removal. Heartless Act, destroy target creature with no counters, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. Inspection of Abundance is a instant speed with kicker, so it can cost 5 mana, 2 green, 3 colorless to choose all 3 of the modes of putting 1/1 counter on a creature. Gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, and target creature you control fights another target creature. You can pick one of them for a green and a colorless, but it's nice to be able to pick all of them. Elspeth's Nightmare, destroy target creature an opponent controls with power 2 or less. Target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-creature lone land card from that player. That player discards it. This card could be placed in like 3 different places in this list. And exile target opponent's graveyard. To kill something, it deals with the troublesome card in the hand, and it deals graveyards. Eat to Extinction, it exiles a creature or a planeswalker for 4 mana, and you can look at a card and put it in your graveyard. So if you're gonna fire off a -5 on Nissa and you have something on top of your library that you want to do with it, you could put it in your graveyard. Erebos' Extinction, or Intervention I should say. Black X, target creature gets -X until end of turn and you gain X life, or exile twice X cards from graveyard, so you can hit your opponent's graveyard if you're dealing with another graveyard based deck. Next we have a couple more hand disruptions with Palaka Predation. It could also be played as a land of Palaka Caverns for a black and 2 colorless. You can have target opponent reveal their hand, choose a pesky 3 converted mana cost or greater card, and have that player discard it. Agonizing Remorse, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, or a card from their graveyard. Remember, graveyard, and exile that card. You lose a life. Then we get to our own graveyard shenanigans. Omen of the Dead. It has flash for 1 mana. You can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And then you can play a black and 2 to scry 2. So it's nice at instant speed. If someone is messing with your graveyard, you can nab something back quite easily. Then we have the Balaged Sanctuary. It is a land, but it's also Balaged Recovery. So for a green and 2 converted mana, or 2 generic mana, you can return target card from your graveyard to your hand. And last we have Agadim's Awakening, 3 black and X. Return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost X or less. So this deck, in theory, you could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would be 10 mana, and I highly doubt you're going to get there. But normally you want to play this for 6 or 7 mana so that you can get back a decent number. And if you need a land in a pinch, you can play it as a land. Then we have some kind of generic fun cards. Timber Symbiosis for 3 green and 4 colorless. And look at the top 7 cards of your library. From among them, put one of them onto the battlefield. If it costs 3 or less, it enters with 3 1/1 counters on it, and then you can put the rest on the bottom of your library. Or you can put it into play as a land, untapped for 3 life. Then we have Return of the Wild Speaker. I like this card a lot. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. So you can draw a lot of cards with this deck if you can fire this off with a Beanstalk Giant or an Ashaya in play, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 into the end of the turn, and you can end the game that way. Once Upon a Time. So this spell is the first spell you've cast this game. You can cast it without playing its mana cost. More often than not, I use this to find a land, but if you're in the late game, you could also find a creature. And then you so you look at 5 cards, pick a creature or a land, put that into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Heroic Intervention. It's a one-sided blowout. You can give your permanents hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn at instant speed. We have 3 planeswalkers in the deck, not including our commander. We have Liliana, Waker of the Dead, a 4 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker, +1. Each player discards a card. Each opponent who can't loses 3 life. With Nissa, discarding a card is not the end of the world. -3, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. Rex is the number of cards in your graveyard, so you can hopefully have enough to kill something or make something small enough that it's out of the way. And then if you can protect it and get it to its 7, you get an emblem that at the beginning of your combat on your turn, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. So you're killing their things, milling your things, picking the best thing out of the graveyards, and go. Vivian, Monster's Advocate, is a 5 mana, 3 loyalty planeswalker. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can cast, you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. So it's nice with the creature suite we have. And it protects itself. You can create a 3/3 beast creature token with either Vigilance, Reach, or Trample, and then you can pay a -2 when you cast your next creature spell this turn. Search your library for a creature card with lesser converted mana cost, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So you can go and get the best creature spell that you need for the time if you can cast a creature with high enough converted mana cost. And the last card in the deck, Garruk, Cursed Huntsman. It's a 6 mana, 5 loyalty Garruk planeswalker. It has a 0 of creating 2 black and green wolf creature tokens with. When this creature dies, put a loyalty counter on each Garruk you control. I don't have the other Garruk in this deck, but I imagine in other formats like EDH, Commander, not Brawl, this could put a few counters on a few Garruks. -3, destroy target creature, draw a card, so it protects itself in 2 ways, either creating creatures or blowing something up. And then if you can get it to 6, you can kill off your own wolves or have them kill them off. You get an emblem with creatures you control have +3/+3 and have trample. For a deck that focuses on landfall, you might think the deck has few lands. It has 5 swamps. Castle Garenbrig gives you 6 green mana if you can use its ability. Or 2 green and 2 colorless at 6 green mana that can only be cast creature spells and abilities. It has 6 swamps. It has the Jungle Hollow, enters tapped, gain a life, black or green. Temple of Melody, enters the battlefield tapped, you scry 1, green or a black. Command Tower adds green or a black. We have Evolving Wilds, sacrifice it, find a basic, put it in play tapped. And Fabled Passage, sacrifice, search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library. If you control 4 or more lands, untap that land. So with that, we have 5, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 lands plus a bunch of ramp spells. So we get there in the end. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. Ding ding. And this is Nissa of Shadowed Boughs. Alright, if you enjoyed the deck, leave a comment in the comment section below on how you would improve or what you would change. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. Bye for now.